Welcome back to Tales of Knights and Magic. Subscribe if you like, and now get comfortable, and enjoy this glimpse into the world of fantasy. A harsh wind bites at Jaren Holt's face as he trudges up the narrow switchbacks of Stormpeak Pass, each labored step gripping the reins of his creaking spice cart. Dawn's first light paints the granite cliffs in bruised purples and grays, below a sheer drop into swirling clouds that promise certain death for the careless. In his satchel rests the last of his silver leaf spice, worth more than a small kingdom's ransom, but the only hope of buying back his family's long-lost farm. Behind him, the cart's single lantern sways, its glow swallowed by a rising gale. When his father fell ill and the bank foreclosed on their Stormvale fields, Jaren swore he'd reclaim the land by any means. He spent every copper he could beg or borrow on a single shipment of Valewood spice, only to watch rival smugglers sell half their cargo for a fraction of its worth. Now, after weeks of hard bargaining with Era Windwick, the rebel mage whose wards keep the pass runes blind, and Captain Soren Blackwater, who promises safe sea passage, he's closer than ever. But Kale Frost's bandits lie in wait, and every thunderous crack of wind could herald their ambush. Halfway through the howling gate, the sky cracks open with a gale so fierce the cart threatens to topple. Jaren lashes the barrels with fresh rope as jagged hail slams into his shoulders. He hears a horn's distant blast, Kale's war horn echoing against the cliffs. Era's violet glow wards flare to life, forming a tunnel of calm, through which Jaren drives the cart. Ironbound trees howl, stones rattle loose, but they emerge breathless into the lee of the next ridge without missing a single pout. Hours later, they slip into the Valewood's mist-shrouded trails, silver leaf vines brushing their cloaks like curious fingers. Garrett Tussin, his one-time partner turned loyal friend, excavates a hidden glade where Moonwood's dull any trail left behind. For a moment, Jaren allows himself a victorious grin. The price of his spice will cover the farm's debts, maybe even buy new livestock. But when they reach the edge of the Ember Marsh at day's end, the first twist strikes. Blackwater's Landing Cove, normally a hive of black market dealings, lies silent and stripped bare. The docks are splintered, the warehouse is gutted, and not a keg of Valewood spice remains. Jaren's heart clenches. Garrick's face has gone ashen. Footprints lead away, not to the Crimson Tide, but deeper into the marsh. Kale's trademark snow-white hair glints among the reeds, and behind him march Frost's raiders, their leather saddles dripping swamp water. How much did they take? Era calls, voice tight. Jaren counts his empty satchel. Every pouch gone, he staggers back, mouth dry. Everything. The bandits see him and spur their mounts, bloodthirsty grins cutting the gray dawn. Jaren's dream lies in tatters. The cost of his gamble vanished in the blink of a blade. As the war horn shatters the marsh's stillness, Jaren turns to his friends. Garrick heaves his hammer fist. Era raises her staff's crackling runes, and even Mars of the Rift, drawn by rumors she couldn't resist, steps from the mist with her shadow cap. We started together, she says, voice low but determined. We'll finish together. So the smuggler of Stormpeak Pass finds himself deeper in the mire than ever, stripped of coin, hunted by bandits and racing back through Valewood towards Stormvale itself, where his family's farm may have withered into ruin. The deal that would have set everything right has fallen apart, and Jaren knows there are no shortcuts left. With a bitter nod, he tightens his cloak and grips the rein. The journey continues through gale, mist and marsh, because now more than ever, he must fight not just for wealth, but for the home that depends on his cunning and courage. A hiss of steam rose from the Ember Marsh as Jaren Holt stood ankle-deep in sulphurous muck, staring at the empty silhouette of Blackwater's landing docks. He tasted ash on his tongue and saw Kale Frost's bandits melting into the misty reeds with his stolen pouches of silver leaf spice. Behind him, Garrett Tussin swore under his breath, hefting his hammer fist as though he could batter the air into revealing hidden pockets of loot. Era Windwick's staff glowed dimly in her trembling hand, wards flickering as the marsh's unnatural magic threatened to drown their senses and fevered dream visions. Maris of the Rift emerged from the haze like a shadow in motion, her cat's eyes gleaming. They won't escape far, she said, voice low. Frost's men aren't trackers. This marsh will lure them into traps. She pointed deeper into the reeds where broken footprints diverged toward a sunken causeway half swallowed by quick bog. That way, follow me. Jaren hesitated only a moment before urging Garrick forward. Each step was a gamble. The mud sucked at leather boots and plumes of noxious vapor curled around their ankles. Era chanted softly to hold the hallucinations at bay, visions of screaming fields and drowning livestock that threatened to overwhelm them. The emberflies in Maris's lanterns danced nervously, their gentle glow the only reliable light in the swirling gloom. Ahead, the broken causeway led to a series of crumbling stone pillars, remnants of an ancient temple, said to have been devoted to a marsh spirit both benevolent and capricious. Ka's bandits had holed up among its collapsed arches, loading sacks into crude skiff boats carved from driftwood. Jaren's chest tightened. The sight of spiced barrels bobbing in the brackish water sent a pulse of desperation through him. Split up, Cosfrost barked to his raiders as they pulled oars. His own skiff drifted toward the central chamber's pillared entrance. Hunt them down and take back what's ours. He swung his crimson-tipped dagger in a broad arc, then vaulted into his boat. Maris dashed toward a fallen arch, her shadow cat at her heels, flattening herself behind a moss-slicked pillar. Garrick, she hissed, draw their fire, keep them busy while Jaren and Era circle around. Garrick grinned through a spray of mud. On it. He strode forward, raising his hammer to draw the bandits' attention. With a roar, he charged the nearest raider, smashing his weapon into a skull and sending the man tumbling into the reeds. The others spun, halting the skiff in place, momentarily diverted. Jaren seized the chance. He and Era crouched low, slipping through waist-high reeds toward the largest skiff where silver-leaf barrels sat half-submerged. Hurry, Jaren urged, his voice raw. He waded forward, bracing against the spines of kelp tendrils until he reached the butt. With trembling hands, he levered open the crates and dragged the first pouch free. The spice's heady perfume exploded in his lungs, and for a heartbeat he stood paralyzed by triumph. A shout rang out as a bandit raised a rusted harpoon. He's here, the harpoon hissed through the air. But Era stepped between them. Staff crackling, she unleashed a spike of gale magic that snapped the harpoon shaft like kindling. The wave of wind knocked the bandit off his feet, sending him sprawling into the murky water. Jaren snapped back to duty. He scooped up 3 pouches, enough to make the farm payment, and shoved them into his satchel. His fingers itched for more. But every second there brought frost-drenched teeth of Kale's men closer. He winked at Era. I got what I need, let's move. They darted back toward a break in the pillars where Garrick's brash bellow guided them. Behind them, Maris's shadow cat leapt atop a second skiff, clawing at the banner Kale had tied to the mast. The cat's furious screeching shattered Kale's orders, and the bandits' discipline crumbled in the chaos. Jaren bolted across the causeway, Era at his side. Garrick roared as he waded through the water, clubbing any raider foolish enough to block the exit. Maris slipped from her hiding place with her own dagger drawn, sending 2 stunned cutthroats crashing into the mud. Within heartbeats, the 4 of them reached firm ground, and Grenfell's echoing laughter signaled the collapse of bandit morale. Panting but elated, they pressed on through the reeds until the causeway gave way to dry marsh edge. Beyond lay a narrow logging trail that shattered coast smugglers used in times of wet tide. Jaren paused to catch his breath. Sackett half full at last. We did it, he panted. Era's violet glow faded to a steady hum. Maris sheathed her dagger. Garrick barked a triumphant laugh. But as they emerged into the dawn's pale light, the first twist of their new nightmare took shape. Not a farm token of debt, but a battered rider on a dying pony. The man's armor bore the crest of Stormvale's petty lord, and across his chest was branded a fresh scorch. An official noticed that the foreclosed lands had been granted to another. His eyes met Jaren's with a pleading desperation. They've sold the fields, the rider rasped, collapsing into the mud. To the new baron he claims the debt was never paid. He coughed blood. If you have but these, he gestured at the satchel. Please take these coins and pay what you can. Save my village. Save my family. Jaren felt the world tilt beneath him. The silver leaf he'd risked everything for, stolen from bandits fought for amid gale and mist, had no power here. The farm was gone again. His fingers clenched around the satchel's strap. Garrick steadied him with a firm grip. There must be another way, he growled. Era knelt beside the rider, searching his wounds. This goes deeper than debt, she murmured. Stormvale's lord sold the land to a rival house, one that bribed the bank. She pressed her staff's tip to the man's wounds. A sliver of violet light stitched flesh as he gasped. This is political and bloody. Maris stepped forward, face grim. I know where they're headquartered. The rival baron's keep lies northeast, across the Ashen Badland. It's heavily fortified, but if you have the coin to buy your claim, you have enough to bribe your way inside. She offered a smooth smile. Then we reclaim your land, permanently. Jaren stared at the ruined rider, throat tight with desperation and anger. We go to Arkan's Hole, he whispered. We face an army with nothing but coin and cunning. He shook his head. No, not just cunning. He lifted his gaze to his friends. Garrick's hammer fist glinting, Era's staff pulsing with resolve, Maris's shadow cat sniffing at the satchel. We go with fire, storm, shadow and steel. We take back what's ours by any means necessary. As dawn burned away the last of Ember Marsh's mist, Jaren Holt, smuggler turned rebel, walked forward on a new path of peril, determined to wrest Stormvale from corruption itself. The journey would stretch him beyond every storm he'd weathered, but in his clenched fist lay the taste of Silverleaf and vengeance, and the unbreakable promise to rise however many times he fell. The Ashen Badlands lay before them like a wasteland, carved from fire and bone, a cracked expanse of obsidian rock and drifting cinders that shimmered in the rising sun. Jaren Holt paused at the ragged edge of the barren plain, the satchel of reclaimed coins bulging at his side. Behind him, Garrick Chasen hefted his hammer fist, muscles coiled for battle. Ira Windwick's lavender wards danced lightly around her, holding back the worst of the swirling ash, and Maris of the Rift stood silent, her shadow cat's low growl echoing in the hollow wind. Arkan's hold sits atop that ridge, Jaren said, nodding toward a distant hill crowned by blackened battlements. If the rival baron expects bribes, he won't refuse coin backed by force. We'll need both. Garrick spat into the ashen dirt. Force and fire, that's my kind of negotiation. He cracked his knuckles. Let's move before the bank's new lords tighten their hold. They set off across the Badlands, each step stirring swirl after swirl of fine gray dust that coated their boots and clogged Garrick's nostrils. The air tasted of sulfur, every breath burned. Ira's wards formed a protective bubble around their small party, but even so her robes darkened with ash, and she paused often to clear her staff's runic conduits. Mid-morning heat pressed down until the stones themselves seemed to sweat. Jaren carried an extra water skin, but its contents grew tepid. He glanced at the ruined rider's map, then at the jagged horizon. We must find the Drakespire oasis, he said. It lies halfway to the hold, fresh water and a hidden spring. Chenkai's pointed to a cluster of black spires in the distance. That way, she murmured. A pack of stone drakes nests there. They guard the aquifer and profit from desperate travelers. A low rumble rolled across the plain, and Garrick tensed. Stone drakes, he growled. Reptiles born of rock and ember. Greedy beasts. They'll kill for a single drop. He hefted his warhammer. I'll draw them off. You fetch water. Jaren hesitated. Every pouch of coins in the satchel weighed like a promise. But he nodded. Be careful. Ira moved beside him. I can guide you through the sandstone maze. My wards confuse the drake's senses. While Garrick stalked toward a looming drake spine protrusion, growling a challenge, Jaren and Ira slipped into shadow cast by a rim rock. The air shimmered with heat, and Jaren's boots sagged into a crust of cracked mud. Ira whispered an incantation that wove wind glyphs into the ash, momentarily clearing a narrow fissure. Beyond it lay a pool of crystalline water, fed by a subterranean spring, untouched and cold. Jaren knelt and drank deep. The water sweet and pure. He filled his water skin, then paused to scoop up a handful of ochre sand. We'll use this, he said, straining his voice over Garrick's roar, to blind them if they see us. Ira nodded, tucking the sack of sand into her belt. They retraced their steps toward the main path, only to find Garrick locked in a desperate duel with a towering stone drake. Its scales glinted like obsidian plates, and each breath exhaled sparks that hissed against the axe. Garrick's hammer met the beast's rocky flank in a thunderous crack. The drake reared and swept a claw that cleaved through Garrick's shield arm. Jaren's heart lurched, but Ira surged forward with a blast of wind magic that buffeted the drake sideways, buying Garrick a moment's reprieve. Jaren hurled his bag of sand into the drake's face. The creature roared as dust clogged its nostrils. Garrick lunged beneath its raised limb and struck again, this time shattering a segment of scaled hide. The drake collapsed with an earth-shaking thud. Garrick staggered free, blood trickling from a cut on his brow but alive. Jaren dropped to one knee and poured water from his skin into Garrick's parched lips. You good? Jaren rasped. Garrick cracked a grin. A few scars won't stop me. Let's bury this beast where it fell. No one needs its carcass to poison the spring. Together they worked to push the drake's form into the fissure, sealing it with boulders. Ira tended Garrick's wounds with a stitched ward of violet light. Maris and her shadow cat emerged from the dunes, silent as dusk. The path through Arkan's hold is clear, she said, but your wounds go deeper than blades. She glanced at Jaren. You're driven by more than debt. Jaren swallowed ash-thick breath. I can't let my family down again. His voice cracked. I won't fail them. Maris nodded. Then steel yourself for what comes next. A baron's court, where coin buys audience but power demands loyalty. She gestured to the distant hold. And trust me, this lord won't be swayed by coin alone. They gathered their gear and set off once more, each step toward the distant battlements a testament to resolve. The shattered plain stretched out behind them, littered with the bones of drakes and the scars of grief. Ahead, atop a charred hill, Arkan's hold loomed, towers of black stone etched with fiery runes, guarded by banners bearing a golden anvil. As they climbed the final rise, Era's wards flared in warning. The baron's sentries lined the outer walls, armored knights, whose helmets bore the same anvil crest. Jaren's hand drifted to the satchel of coins pulsing at his side. This would be his greatest gamble yet. Walk into the lion's den, offer his reclaimed fortune, and pray the rival baron honors his word. He squared his shoulders, drawing a deep breath of ash-laced air. Stay close, he whispered to his friends. and remember, storm, shadow and steel. With that, Jaren Holt strode down the winding approach toward Arkan's hold, every fiber of his cunning and courage poised for the challenge that would decide not only his family's fate, but whether a single smuggler's ambition could stand against the weight of a baron's greed. The massive gates of Arkan's hold swung open with a grinding protest at Jaren's approach, revealing a courtyard cobbled with black basalt and flanked by torches sputtering orange flame against the ash-gray sky. Sentries in burnished armor stood at attention, helms bearing the golden anvil crest, eyes narrowing as Jaren led Garrick, Era and Maris across the yard. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of fate. A servant in midnight blue livery met them at the forecourt stairs. He inclined his head stiffly. The Baron awaits in the Hall of Judgment. He slipped inside an open archway, motioning them to follow. The air grew warmer as they climbed broad stone steps carved with hammer and anvil motif. Inside, the Hall of Judgment was ringed by towering stained glass windows, depicting the Baron's ancestors forging kingdoms with iron will. At its center, beneath a vaulted dome painted in swirling embers, sat Baron Varric Arkan upon a dais of wrought obsidian. His golden armor gleamed like molten metal, and his eyes as sharp as the blade on his belt, appraised Jaren with cool detachment. "Jaren Holt," came Baron Arkan's resonant voice. "I've heard of your resilience." He swept a gauntlet-clad hand toward an empty chair before him. "Sit, and let us speak of your terms." Jaren swallowed and bowed, gesturing for his companions to stand behind him. "Baron Arkan," he began, voice steady, "I reclaimed these coins from bandits in Ember Marsh at Great Cock. In exchange I request the deed to my family's Stormvale farm, free and clear of encumbrance." He produced the leather pouch and set it on the marble floor. The coins clinked, echoing in the hushed hall. The Baron's gaze flicked to the satchel, then back to Jaren. "A fair price," he conceded. His lips curved into a thin smile. "But deeds are not given lightly here. You owe me a service in return." He rose, silken cloak rustling like liquid gold. "The dread citadel in the Shadow March has grown restless. A chieftain's son fled with a war banner sacred to my house. Retrieve it, and your farm is yours." Jaren's heart sank at the twist. Not simply coin for land, but a dangerous mission beyond Stormvale's borders. He exchanged a quick glance with Ere, whose frown deep. Garrick's knuckles whitened on his hammer fist. Maris remained silent, Shadowcat poised at her side. Baron Arkan continued, voice cold as steel. "This banner is rumored to imbue its bearer with the courage of 10 men. Without it, my legions falter. You have 3 days." He sat once more, folding his arms. "Do this, and Stormvale is yours. Fail or refuse, and the coins are forfeit. Your family's fields will be sold to the highest bidder." The hall's torches sputtered, casting long shadows. Jaren bowed his head, weighing desperation against danger. "I accept," he said firmly. 3 days. As they exited the hall, Maris folded her arms. "A border raid into the Shadow March? Their chieftain's warriors are ruthless. No quarter given." Garrick ground his teeth. "Then we'll give none in return." Ira placed a calming hand on Jaren's arm. "We'll need more than stealth. If we strike at dusk, the Shadow March mists will aid us. If we can survive their witch fires." Jaren squared his shoulders, resolve blazing. "For my home, Stormvale, I'll brave any storm." He turned to face the sun, now dipping behind the anvil-forged towers. "First, we gather supplies, then we ride for the Shadow March." As the 4 companions strode into the dying light, the weight of their new quest settled over them like an iron gauntlet. The road ahead wound through the Baron's lands, across borderlands rife with outlaw camps, and into the haunted Shadow March itself. There, woven within the fog and steel, lay the stolen war banner, and the key to Jaren Holt's last hope. And so, with the clock's relentless tick echoing in their minds, they set forth, ambition steeled by loyalty, courage burnished by necessity, and a single promise guiding them onward, that Stormvale's fields would once again know the tread of the Holt family's feet. Under the blood-red dusk sky, Jaren Holt and his companions slipped out of Arkan's hold through a side gate, laden with fresh cloaks, waterskins and forged steel for the road ahead. Captain Soren Blackwater's quartermaster, brought along at Jaren's request, provided a pair of stout horses and a crude map of outlaw encampments sprinkled along the Baron's borderlands. Ira Windwick tucked silvery salts into her satchel, warding ingredients to quell the Shadow March's witch fires, while Garrick Tussin hefted 2 lanterns filled with marsh fire oil, ready to blind any sentry. Maris of the Rift carried Jaren's satchel of coins and the fragile scroll bearing the terms of their bargain. They rode in single file across the anvil-forged plains outside Arkan's Hold. Wind gusted across the basalt, carrying embers from distant forges and the hollow clang of a baron's drilling troops. Each mile brought them farther from Stormville's rolling fields and into the lawless borderlands, where abandoned watchtowers cowered beneath crimson sky. Jaren's eyes burned with purpose. In less than 3 days he must penetrate the dread Citadel's inner sanctum, outwit its wardens and reclaim Baron Arkan's stolen war banner, else his family's reclaimed lands would pass once more into strangers' hands. Night fell like a curtain of ash as they reached the first outpost, a shattered guardhouse whose walls were scorch-marked by insurgent fires. Maris dismounted silently, her shadow cat slinking through the tall grass beside her. Under cover of Garrick's lumbering silhouette, she crept forward to listen at the gate. A lone sentry, a gaunt soldier, eyes hollow, paced beneath a battered anvil crest. Maris raised her dagger, but Jaren shook his head. Instead, Ira whispered a frost-warding spell that chilled the guard's vision, sending him stumbling into a drunken stupor without a sound. With the path clear, Garrick hefted the gate's ancient beam, and the four slipped inside. Within the outpost's shattered walls they found stockpiles of salted meat, dried grains and a cache of Baron's coin, likely intended for border pay. Jaren paused, finger on a half-filled pouch. "This could fund our bribe should force fail," he murmured. Ira nodded, snatching the pouch. "Every advantage matters." They mounted again at the first light, following the quartermaster's map across a thin river glinting with morning frost. The dread Citadel's silhouette emerged on the horizon, a looming fortress carved into the side of a craggy hill, its spires crowned with thorned ironwork. Below, tents and lean-tos clustered like scavenger birds around the base, crowds of outlaw sellswords and mercenaries, who answered to no lord but gold. Jaren felt his pulse quicken at the sight. 3 days to slip past these walls, avoid the mercenary captains, and find the Baron's treasure vault where the war banner hung in defiance. He glanced at his friends, Garrick's glinting hammer, Ira's steady gaze, Maris's determined frown, and drew a deep breath of cold air. "Tonight," he said, voice low yet fierce, "we shadow-step through their camp. Ira will cloak us in moon silence. Maris will weave through their ranks and find the vault's secret entrance. Garrick and I will meet her there, bartering coin for the banner or carving a way through steel if we must. Are we agreed?" Each nodded, resolve hardening like forged iron. As the Citadel's gates creaked shut behind a patrol, Jaren led his companions into the gathering twilight, preparing to face the darkest challenge of his journey, and to wield every shard of cunning, courage, and coin in his quest to win back, not just land, but the honor of his family name. They skirted the outer tents as dusk settled into an inky violet sky. Ira's moon silence ward wrapping them in near invisibility. The campfire glow revealed mercenaries laughing over cracked mugs of ale, and the flicker of torchlight on steel. Maris melted ahead into the shadows, her shadow cat slipping beside her, ears pricked for the vault's hidden entrance. Jaren and Garrick followed at a distance, hearts pounding, each careful footstep echoing louder than thunder in the tense stillness. Maris paused at a low outcropping of stone, where the ground sloped into the Citadel's flank. She traced her fingertips along a seam in the rock, recalling the legends of a scribe's passage concealed by centuries-old runes. Whispers of her dagger on stone triggered a panel to shift inward, revealing a narrow tunnel choked with dust and cobwebs. Jaren exhaled as Maris beckoned them forward. Garrick raised his hammer fist, ready to smash any trap, but the tunnel lay silent. They slipped inside, Ira sealing the mouth behind them with a soft swirl of wind. The corridor narrowed, lit only by phosphorescent lichen clinging to the walls. Each step stirred motes of pale green light, and every breath tasted of mold and old secret. They rounded a final bend into a vaulted chamber whose walls were lined with weapon racks, all empty save for rusted blades. At its center stood a stone dais, and upon it, draped in crimson silk, the Baron's war banner, a golden anvil emblazoned on blood-red cloth. Jaren's pulse thundered as he stepped forward. Garrick at his side, Ira hovered at the threshold, staff ready. Maris kept watch on the dark tunnel behind. "Grab it," Jaren whispered. He reached out, then froze as the floor trembled. From the walls, iron-barred portcullises slammed down with deafening clangs, sealing the chamber. Torches sputtered to life in sconces, revealing steel trap niches along the walls, crossbows primed and aimed. A hidden mechanism clicked, and from the daise's base, a low hiss echoed. "Gas," Ira breathed. Eyes widening, she raised her staff again, chanting a word of repulsion that formed a shimmering dome around them. Garrick slammed his hammer into the daise's side, cracking the stone, but the war banner shifted, untying itself and flapping toward the far wall as if alive. Maris darted forward, snatching it from its perch, silk whispering through her fingers. Behind her, the hiss grew louder, faint green vapor creeping beneath their feet. Jaren snarled, pulling Maris back. Back to the tunnel, now. They sprinted toward the exit, Ira's dome holding back the gas just long enough. Arrows thudded into stone around them, and Garrick's laughter pealed as he deflected a bolt with his hammer. At the tunnel mouth, Ira slammed her staff into the rock, wind surging in to blast the portcullis free. The stone grate groaned upward, releasing the gas in a choking way. They tumbled into the corridor as the ward collapsed. Maris clutched the banner to her chest. Jaren staggered after her, gasping for clean air. Garrick barreled into the chamber to retrieve his fallen lantern, then joined them in retreat. Behind them, the Citadel's alarms rang out, a cacophony of ringing bells and shouted orders. They dashed through the phosphorescent tunnel, Ira's wards guiding them past collapsing traps. Garrick felling guards who stumbled into the corridor and Maris leading them toward the hidden exit. They burst into the open just as dawn's first light painted the Badlands in bruised gold. Horses waited where they'd hidden them, 2 for Jaren and Ira, 1 for Maris and Garrick to share. They mounted at a run, banner secured, and urged their mounts into a full gallop across the ash-strewn plain. Behind them, the dread Citadel's gates swung wide as its garrison poured forth, armored knights pursuing across the wasteland. But dawn's light and surging speed carried Jaren and his companions beyond arrow range, and soon the fortress receded to a dark silhouette against the rising sun. Jaren collapsed at last in the saddle, banner unfurled behind him like a banner of victory. Garrick whooped, "You did it, Holt, you did it." Ira's tired smile glowed violet in dawn's haze. Maris wiped sweat and ash from her brow, her shadow cat purring on her shoulder. As the first ridge of Stormpeak Pass appeared ahead, Jaren pressed the precious banner to his heart. "Stormvale, here we come," he whispered. "Let no baron ever claim it again." And so, battered but unbroken, they rode toward home, Jaren Holt triumphant at last. The war banner flying high as proof that even the harshest bargains, forged in the crucible of wind and stone, could reclaim what was rightfully there. They crested the ridge of ashen Badlands, just as the twin suns bled blood red across Arkan's hold. The battered war banner fluttered defiantly atop Jaren's mount, its golden anvil blazing in the dying light. Garrick and Maris flanked him, Ira's wards crackling faintly around the 4 of them like a second skin. Below, the hold's gates swung open at their approach. Baron Arkan's guard unmistakably alert, spears leveled. Jaren dismounted on the outer courtyard's scorched flagstones, heart pounding. He strode up the wide steps to the Hall of Judgment, Maris and Garrick trailing close, Ira at his shoulder. Inside, Baron Arkan rose from his dais, expression unreadable. "You return in record time," he said, voice velvet smooth, "and you bear my banner." He gestured to 2 armored pages, who seized the trophy. Jaren held out the deed to Stormvale. "You promised my farm, free and clear upon my success." His voice rang across the hall. The Baron took the deed, his gauntleted finger tracing the crest. For a heartbeat, Jaren dared hope. Then the Baron's lips curled. "A fine tale of daring," he purred, "but a Baron's mercy is not so easily earned. I find your tenacity admirable. I'll grant you the farm under one new condition." The Baron's gaze flicked over the 4 companions. "Swear fealty to House Arkan in blood, and sign this new charter of vassalage. Only then will Stormvale be yours." He produced a sealed scroll, its terms mortally binding. Jaren's stomach sank. "You tricked me," he spat. Garrick's hammer fist tightened. "A debt paid in coin, not in servitude." Baron Arkan's smile grew cold. "Loyalty is the highest currency." He snapped his fingers. The pages drew steel on Jaren. "Refuse and your deed is void. Your family's fields will forfeit." Again. In that moment, Ira's wards flared bright. Maris drew her shadow cat's claws and Garrick hefted his hammer fist. Jaren's jaw set. "So be it," he said softly. He hurled the bag of Baron's coin across the dais. It burst open, silver rattling like defiance. "I will not kneel." Steel clashed in the vaulted hall. Garrick crashed into the pages, hammer shattering armor. Maris darted forward, snatching the sealed charter and shredding its seal with a vicious flick of her dagger. Ira unleashed a gale blast that sent armored knights reeling against stained glass window. Jaren lunged for the war banner's shaft and reclaimed it, its silk snapping like a battle cry. Baron Arkan rose to his feet, eyes blazing with fury. He drew his blade, but at that moment, the Hold's own garrison, inspired by the very banner Arkan cherished, surged behind Jaren's companion. Soldiers who had grown weary of the Baron's greed turned their spears inward. Caught between 2 forces, Arkan hesitated enough for Jaren to plunge the banner's haft into the dais, forging a silent vow of freedom. A roar of triumph echoed as the Baron's guards lowered their weapons. Garrick yanked Arkan's blade from its scabbard and cast it aside. Maris bound the fallen lord's hands in silk ribbon. Ira's wards faded to gentle blue light. Jaren stepped onto the dais and raised the war banner high. Stormville is ours, not by bribe but by the will of its people. Cheers thundered through the hall. The Baron was escorted in chains from his throne room, and the deed to Stormville, a clean unencumbered parchment, was affixed to the dais in plain sight. Outside, villagers poured into the courtyard, faces alight with hope as the new lord of Stormville, Jaren Holt, at last took his place among them. That night, beneath a sky ablaze with stars, a festival lit the fields of Stormville. Lanterns swung from oak boughs, laughter rang through the air, and the smell of fresh baked bread drifted across newly plowed roads. Jaren walked barefoot among the gathered villagers, his arm around Era's shoulders, Garrick at his side, Maris's shadow cat weaving among the children. As drum beats echoed across his reclaimed land, Jaren lifted a simple earthen cup of cider. To whom he toasted, voice rich with relief. The crowd echoed him in a single breath, and in that moment, Jaren Holt, once a hunted smuggler, realized that true wealth was not silverleaf or coins, but the forged bonds of trust, the courage to defy a tyrant, and the unbreakable spirit of those who stood with him through gale, mist, and fire. The bonfire's flames danced high into the star-flecked sky, casting long, playful shadows across the freshly plowed fields of Stormville. Lantern-lit tables groaned under roasted venison, steaming loaves of barley bread, and flagons of honey-spiced mead, as the villagers old and young laughed, sang, and toasted Jaren Holt's name. Era stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, eyes shining brighter than any torchlight. Garrick Toussaint, clad in a simple wool jerkin rather than armor, challenged children to arm wrestling matches, each cheer erupting louder than the last. Maris of the Rift, perched on a low wall with her shadow cat curled at her feet, sipped cider and watched with a half-smile, already calculating the defenses she would organize for the new realm. But as the revelry grew, a fresh wind rose from the east, a cold edge to it, more biting than the gentle summer breeze. The festival's laughter faltered for a moment, as all eyes turned toward the distant silhouette of Stormpeak Path. In that hush, Jaren felt the gale heart shard at his belt stir with an anxious pulse. "My lord," called out Old One, the village elder, hobbling forward on his gnarled staff. "The eastern ridge, the wind's whisper of a coming storm." He raised his hand, palm toward the path. "The howl is not of nature's making." Across the fields the crowd parted as Jaren and Era walked toward the ridge. Garrick and Maris closed ranks behind them, faces set in grim concern. The festival's merriment faded to murmurs as the villagers followed, torches bobbing like silent watchers under the looming night sky. At the crest of the ridge they found the source, a swirling vortex of ash and lightning above the howling gate, broader, darker, and more menacing than anything Jaren had ever summoned or endured. Beneath the funnel of storm, shapes moved like shadows cast by fire, a host of spectral riders on skeletal steeds, their banners tattered, but unmistakably bearing the golden anvil crest of House Arcanang. Era's face paled. "Baron Erkin's curse," she whispered. "He slew the spirit of the Forge Heart in his fury, and now his ghosts ride the winds, seeking vengeance." A deafening crack rumbled as the ghostly cavalry thundered forward, cleaving through the night air. The skeletal horses' hooves burned the heather, and their riders, knights of obsidian bone, raised icy lances that glowed with cursed energy. Below them, the Howling Gate's runes flared red, releasing shockwaves that shook the earth. Jaren drew his sword, its edge humming with the combined power of wind, cloud, wave, and tide, tokens of his journey. "Hold the line," he shouted, turning to the villagers who had followed. Garrick hefted his hammer fist, bellowing a challenge. Maris swept forward with her shadow cat, darting between horsemen to slash at spectral reins. Era schooled her fear and raised her staff, weaving a dome of violet light that deflected the first volley of icy spears. In the chaos, Jaren spurred his horse into the heart of the fray. The phantom riders reared their mounts, charging like a tide of bone. He cut a swath through their ranks, blade singing as it shattered cursed armor. Each slash burned spectral form into ash, but with every fallen specter two more took its place. The battle stretched into the ridge's gloom, steel against phantom steel, courage against despair. Above, the storm raged its fury. Lightning forked through the vortex, and thunder shook the night. The Howling Gate itself, once the source of Arkan's deceitful power, seemed to pulse with dark enchantment. Era's dome flickered under the onslaught as she whispered desperate incantations. Water from the Chronicle's tide page summoned in swirling torrents to quench the lightning's blade. Garrick roared and smashed aside a skeletal lancer, but a second ghost rider reined its mount across his path. His hammer collided with the horse's skull, shattering bone in a spray of eerie green sparks, but the rider lifted its lance for another strike. In that moment, Maris swept in, her dagger carving runic wards onto the rider's helm. The phantom froze, then crumbled into dust, its curse broken. Seeing part of his own banner painted on those ghostly standards, Jaren's heart contracted with sorrow. Arkan's ambition had not only ruined his life, but desecrated the ancestral oaths of his own house. He pressed onward, voice ringing, for Stormbale, for the forge heart. Every word reforged his resolve. At the storm's eye, the howling gate's runestone beckoned with twisted red light. Jaren charged, his blade aflame with the Chronicle's unified magic, and drove it into the runestone center. The impact echoed like an earth shatter, and the vortex above warped, cracking like a mirror. The spectral riders reeled, their forms flickering as the barrier between worlds tore. Ira seized the moment. She thrust her staff skyward, unleashing the final binding ritual of the wind song. Chronic wind, cloud, wave and tide converged in a pillar of pure white light that shot into the howling maelstrom. A deafening silence fell as the cursed wind stilled. The phantom riders wailed once, an echo of regret, and then vanished like smoke in sunlight. For a long moment, all was still. The festival torches flickered, the villagers stared in awed silence, and the ridge lay calm under a canopy of trembling stars. Jaren drew his blade free from the runestone, its red glow extinguished at last. He turned to his companions, Iris trembling with relief, Garrick panting with exertion, Maris resting a hand on her cat's sleek back, and then to the gathered villagers, who now surged forward in cheers of astonished praise. Under the hush of a peaceful night, Jaren Holt raised his blade, no longer a smuggler or a rebel, but a true guardian of Stormvale. Tonight, he proclaimed, we reclaim not just our fields but our very spirit. No curse, no baron's whim, and no force spectral or otherwise, shall ever again threaten our home. Voices answered him with one unified cry. Lanterns flickered in triumph, echoing the first dawn of Stormvale's new era, a land forged in wind and shadow, and bound by the unbreakable courage of its people. And high above the ridge the Howling Gate's stones lay cracked and silent. The phantom banners burned away, their curse lifted forever by the smuggler lord who refused to yield. The wind carried their victory across the fields, and in its gentle song, Jaren sensed the first true promise of peace, and the knowledge that any new storm could be met, so long as he and his friends stood together beneath Stormvale's open sky. Dawn broke over Stormvale in a hush of golden light, the ridge's blackened stones now softened by dew and song. Jaren Holt rose before the village stirred, walking barefoot across the newly tilled fields where he had fought so fiercely the night before. Each footprint in the soft soil felt like a vow fulfilled. Here, life would grow again, grain, vegetables, and hope. He paused at the edge of the plowed furrow and placed a hand against the earth, feeling its quiet strength ripple beneath his palm. Behind him, Ira Windwick emerged from the farmhouse doorway, her robes still flecked with ash and frost. She carried a leather-bound grimoire printed in twilight silver, her personal chronicle of the wind song spell. I've sealed the wards around the ridge, she reported softly, and taught the villagers a simple wind glyph to call light breezes for their crops. The Forgeheart's spirit is at rest, for now. She held out a steaming mug of nettle pear tea, and Jaren accepted it with a grateful nod. To peace, he said, letting the warm bitterness settle in his chest. In the village square, Garrick Tozend had transformed from battle-hardened hauler to earnest foreman. He barked cheerful orders at teams erecting new granaries along the creek bank. Each beam he set in place a promise of plenty. When a group of children struggled to lift sacks of seed, Vandier, a young apprentice once a street urchin turned apprentice farmer, rushed to help, and Garrick clapped him on the shoulder. Keep at it, lad. One day you'll be the one teaching others. Their laughter echoed through the crisp air, a testament to the strength found in unity. Maris of the Rift watched from the shade of the orchard's oldest apple tree, her shadow cat curled at her feet. A delegation of county officials, once skeptical of Jaren's sudden rise, knelt before her as she oversaw the drafting of a new charter. Her keen mind and ruthless efficiency had won their respect. Under her guidance, the village would fortify its borders not with walls of stone, but with a network of loyal scouts, and covert messages hidden in the forest's whispers. When she caught Jaren's eye, she offered a rare, genuine smile. Stormvale's future is secure, but vigilance remains our greatest ally. As midday light warmed the fields, a herald arrived on a dust-choked pony, bearing a sealed scroll from Captain Soren Blackwater himself. The parchment spoke of a new alliance. The Crimson Tide would carry Stormvale's grain and spice to distant isles in return for enchanted tools to irrigate the highland terraces. Jaren broke the seal and let the missive unfurl, eyes shining. A trade network, he whispered, not just for survival, but for prosperity. That evening, the villagers gathered beneath the oak boughs once more. Lanterns swayed in the gentle breeze as a borderland minstrel tuned his lute. His first tune was a simple melody, one Jaren and Ira had taught him, a song of wind calling rain. As the chords rose, the last emberflies Maris had saved flickered in the orchard's dusk, weaving a dance of silent light. Jaren looked to Ira, Garrick and Maris, his comrades through mist, mire and storm, and felt the future unfold before them. Stormvale had been reclaimed, its fields reborn, its people united, yet they all knew that peace, like the land, must be tended. Tomorrow they would wake to tend seedlings, to strengthen wards, to broker alliances, but tonight, under an open sky bursting with stars, they simply allowed themselves the sweetness of victory and the promise of all the stories still waiting to be written in the wind. And somewhere beyond the distant hills, the gale heart shard at Jaren's side pulsed with quiet approval, a reminder that no matter how fierce the storm, its song would always guide them home. Long after the last emberflies faded, and the minstrel's song drifted into silence, the villagers of Stormvale lingered beneath the orchard's silver-leaf boughs, reluctant to let the night end. Jaren Holt stood at the edge of the feast circle, watching the flicker of lantern light on young faces, still alight with wonder. In his hand he held a mug of cooled cider, sweet on his tongue, yet tinged with the sharp tang of lingering war. Tomorrow, he murmured to Era, who stood beside him in robes now neatly mended against the day's work, the fields demand our hands again. But tonight, we hold this moment. She nodded, lifting her own mug in quiet agreement. Around them Garrick Tisend was teaching two grinning boys how to swing a wooden training hammer, laughter ringing like chimes. Maris crouched by the old apple stump, her shadow cat kneading its paws into Jaren's cloak, as if marking the territory of home. A sudden cry rose from the farmhouse window. Old Win, leaning heavily on his staff, beckoned them inside. By its hearth, he held up a folded cloth pouch stamped with a strange sigil, an intricate spiral of wind and flames entwined. Jaren unwrapped it and found inside a single rune-etched feather, pale as mist but warm to the touch. Win's rheumy eyes glistened in the firelight. "A courier from the Whispering Fen," he announced, voice cracking with age and excitement. "They found this in the ruins of Elmore's sunken library. The Sky Hoarders claim this feather unlocks a lost page of the Windsong Chronicle, one beyond wind, cloud, wave, or tide." Silence fell as each of them absorbed what this meant. The Chronicle, thought complete, might still hold secrets. Secrets that could shape the very skies above Stormvale. Ira's fingers trembled as she traced the feather's rune. "If this is true," she whispered, "the Chronicle's song could weave Stormward magic again. Magic that might protect these fields from drought or draw rain when we need it most." Jaren looked around at the faces of his friends, each one tested by storms of battle, bound now by love of this land. He felt the familiar pulse of the Gale Heart Shard and the promise it bore. Raising his gaze, he addressed them all. "We've only just claimed peace. If the Whispering Fen calls for us, then Stormvale must wait. But we go as one, because our home depends on the balance we sow elsewhere." Outside, the first crow of dawn echoed across the fields. As the lanterns were extinguished and the village settled into uneasy slumber, Charanira, Garrick, and Maris gathered their gear by the hearth. Beyond the farmhouse door, a new wind stirred, one carrying the distant call of ancient magic and the promise of another journey. And so, under the same stars that had witnessed Stormvale's rebirth, they set out again, four figures stepping into the pre-dawn mist, each driven by duty, curiosity, and the unbreakable bonds of comradeship. Behind them lay fields newly seeded, before them the long road to the Whispering Fen, where the next verse of the Chronicle, and perhaps a storm that could wash life into every furrow, awaited discovery. In the hush before sunrise, Jaren tightened his cloak, feeling the shard at his side pulse once more. The story of Stormvale was far from over. It had merely turned the page. The morning mist clung low to the fields, as Jaren Holt and his companions crested the hill overlooking Stormvale one last time. Beyond lay the winding river that fed the Whispering Fen, its reeds a silvery sea that whispered of hidden depths. Ira lifted her staff, tracing a protective sigil in the air. "These wards will keep the Fen's illusions at bay," she reminded them softly. Garrick slung his hammer across his back, and Maris's shadow cat padded silently at her healer's heels, amber eyes reflecting the dawn. Their path followed the riverbank, where songbirds drawn by the restored orchards flitted through the willow boughs. But as they entered the Fen's boundary, the air grew cool and heavy with enchantment. Reeds bowed in greeting, and every breath carried the faint echo of half-remembered song. Jaren felt the Gale Heart Shard pulse in his belt, steadying his resolve. "Stay close," he whispered. "Trust in the wards and in each other." For hours they wove through ribboned waterways and mist-shrouded clearing. At midday they found the ruined spire of Aylmore, rising from the reeds, black stone carved with spirals of cloud and flame, half sunken into the bog. Ira's eyes shone. The Sky Hoarder's envoy must have found the feather of Stormsong among these stones. She gathered her wards tighter. "We move at once." They clambered over moss-slick steps into the spire's hollow heart. There, on a marble plinth fretted by lichen, lay a single parchment scroll bound by a pale feather, rune-etched and still humming with power. But as Jaren reached out, the air crackled. Shadows gathered in the corners, coalescing into four figures clad in fen masks of reed and root. The Sky Hoarders, guardians of lost sky magic. Their leader stepped forward, voice like rustling leaves. Only those who prove themselves by Song of Storm may claim this page. Share your story in wind and word, or leave empty-handed. Jaren exchanged a determined glance with Era. Drawing the feather from its binding, he invoked the Chronicle's forgotten verse. Feather of storm, born of cloud and sky, grant us truth in wind's reply. He plucked the feather and struck it against his sword's pommel. A sudden gust spiraled through the spire, lifting reeds and dust into a living vortex. With each turn of the feather, Jaren spoke of Stormvale's trials of mist-shrouded passes, ember marsh ambushes, and the night he shattered Arkan's curse. His voice rose with honest pride, his tail swept along by the storm song he woke. The sky hoarders listened, silent as statues, until the vortex stilled. Then their masks cracked into soft smiles of driftwood. Your song is true, the leader intoned. She stepped aside. Take the final page, Stormcaller's scion. Jaren knelt and lifted the scroll. As he unrolled it, the feather dissolved into glowing script, weaving itself into the Chronicle's tapestry of wind, cloud, wave, tide, and now, storm. The spire trembled, and for one breath, the entire fen held its quiet breath in awe. With the page secured, the wards melted away. Ira exhaled, tears of relief shining on her cheeks. Garrick whooped, echoing through the ancient stones. Maris bowed her head, Shadowcat purring at her feet. Together they descended from Almor's spire into the whispering reeds. Beyond them lay Stormvale, fields waiting for rain, orchards thirsting for breeze, and a festival yet to be sung. Jaren pressed the feather paper into his pack and turned to his friends. Home calls, he said with a grin. Let's bring the storm's gift to those who've tilled the earth by hand. And as they slipped back through the fen's gentle mists, the final verse of the Windsong Chronicle hummed in the air, a promise that every storm carries both challenge and grace, and that the story of Stormvale would sing on forever in wind and feather and friendship. By the time they slipped from the whispering fen's misty embrace and crested the ridge above Stormvale, the sun was high, and the air carried an electric promise of rain. Down below, the newly sown fields lay parched, the furrows thirsty beneath a relentless sun. Villagers paused in their midday toil as Jaren Holt and his companions emerged, banner of the Forge Heart fluttering at their backs and Ira's staff aloft, humming with the power of the newly claimed Storm Song page. Jaren raised his voice so the whole valley could hear. People of Stormvale, gather at the Well of Whispers. His command echoed across the field. Within minutes, farmers, elders, and children, faces lined with hope and weariness, assembled around the ancient stone well at the village heart. Ira stepped forward, the scroll unfurling in her other hand. The rune-etched feather dissolved into swirling motes of silver as she traced the final verse in the chronicle. Storm song, wing of cloud and roar, ungird the sky, and bring us more. Let thirsty earth receive your grace, and sweeping winds refresh this place. A tremor rippled through the valley. Clouds gathered loose, billowing gray at first, then darkening to ink black. A low rumble rolled across the sky as wind glyphs danced along the well's rim, carved ages ago to welcome falling water. Jaren stepped aside as the first raindrops splashed into the carved basin, gentle at first, then quickening into a steady downpour that soaked the parched earth and sent cheers roaring through the crowd. Children leapt into puddles. Farmers lifted their faces to the sky, hands outstretched to catch life's renewal. Garrick Tuzzin bellowed with laughter, letting the rain soak through his jerkin. Maris whispered thanks to unseen forest spirits, and her shadow cat darted through the crowd, pouncing on rivulets with gleeful abandon. As the rain fell, Jaren knew this was only the beginning. The Storm Song page had restored Stormvale's fields, but with prosperity came new challenges, negotiating trade treaties with neighboring duchies, eager to buy their surplus grain, defending their water rights against downstream barons, and ensuring the Chronicle's magic remained a blessing, not a temptation for greed. That evening, under lantern-lit pavilions strung between the apple trees, Stormvale held its grand festival of storms. Traders from Arkan's hold arrived, now allies rather than overlords, bearing artisan wares and heralding the Crimson Tide's regular voyages. Nera opened her makeshift school beside the orchard, teaching wind glyphs to curious villagers. Garrick led teams erecting new windmills, their sails sketched with cloud-scribed symbols to channel gentle breezes for milling grain. Maris organized the Watch of Whispers, a network of scouts patrolling the borders for bandits or droughtmongers, each bearing a rune of protection gifted by Era. Late that night, Jaren found himself alone on the ridge overlooking the valley, the Chronicle's pages safely stowed in his study. He drew the Galeheart shard from his belt and watched its gentle glow pulse against the wet earth. Memories of Ember Marsh ambushes, of Arkan's deceit, and of spectral riders that once threatened to drown Stormvale in fury flickered through his mind. Yet here, beneath a sky reborn by wind and rain, he felt a deep, unshakable peace. A soft voice broke the hush. Era joined him, her robes damp and hair glistening with rain. You did it, she said simply. You reshaped fate with your own hand. She held out her palm, and the shard floated into her grasp, its glow brightening. But remember, the Chronicle's power is never truly ours. It's a gift of balance. We must guard it, steward it well. Jaren nodded, stepping closer so their shoulders brushed. We will. He bowed, eyes fixed on the valley's rising mist. As long as the winds blow and clouds gather, Stormveil stands. Behind them, the distant laughter of the festival drifted up the hill, a living reminder that even the fiercest storm can birth the gentlest dawn, and that every story, no matter how long, still has pages waiting to be written. And so, under a canopy of clouds still heavy with promise, Jaren Holt and his companions turned back toward home, ready to face whatever new twists the wind might bring. Together, at sunrise, Stormveil stirred with purposeful energy rather than yesterday's celebratory haze. Along the orchard's edge, Garrick Tisson supervised the placement of new windmills, each blade etched with Era's wind glyphs to channel gentle breezes through the granaries. Maris of the Rift rode out at first light to inspect the new scout posts along the western woodline, her shadowcat perched alert on her saddle. Inside the Hall of Winds, Jaren Holt stood before a semicircle of local councilors, farmers and the village elder, Old Wind, as a trio of lacquered carriages rumbled up the flagstone drive. From the lead carriage disembarked three impeccably dressed envoys from the neighboring dukedom of Greywater, Ambassador Lysandra Kaelwyn, water merchant Tabar Sorath, and Lady Celine of House Clarith, whose embroidered silken cloak bore a stylized fish and river wave crest. They curtsied and bowed, eyes respectfully on Jaren's war banner still draped above the dais. Ambassador Lysandra stepped forward. Lord Holt, the bounty of your storm song rains has filled the river we share, yet Greywater's canals run dry, and our people face famine. We seek Stormveil's cooperation, a regulated flow of river waters through the dry season. Her tone was courteous but firm. Tabar Sorath produced a ledger bound in watertight leather. We're prepared to offer Stormveil fair trade for any excess, but if supplies falter, our grain docks will creak empty, and unrest will spread. Lady Celine's gaze drifted to Ira's study alcove, where the Chronicle's elemental pages glowed softly on glass pedestal. Also, she said, voice low, there are rumors that those runes can command more than rain. Our house seeks knowledge and partnership. Jaren listened, weighing the entreaties. Stormveil had enough grain, too much perhaps, to spare a regulated share. An alliance with Greywater promised new markets via the Crimson Tide's trade routes. Yet he felt a twinge of caution. The Chronicle's power was rare and fragile. He turned to Ira, whose silver glow wards pulsed in anticipation. We will cooperate with Greywater, Jaren declared, but any sharing of Chronicle lore must be carefully controlled. I propose a commission of Stormveil's council, Greywater's engineers, and Era herself to oversee a canal ritual, guided by the Rune of Tides to ensure fair flows without risking drought here. The envoys murmured approval, Lady Celine curtsying. Tabar's smile was broad. Sandra inclined her head. Stormveil honors its neighbors, she said. May our peoples thrive together. As the envoys withdrew to plan the joint commission, Jaren and Era exchanged a quick glance. A new challenge, she murmured, but managing the river is just one test. Indeed, Jaren replied. I've received word from Captain Blackwater of trouble at sea. Rogue alchemists, using the Chronicle's wave glyphs to summon toxic tides against coastal towns. He ran a hand through his hair. If that magic is perverted, no canal or covenant will save us. Maris returned at that moment, face set. Bandits are organizing along the northern highroad, she reported. They claim to bear your banner and promise Stormveil's downfall unless paid tribute. A hush fell. Stormveil's peace was under threat from both river and road, land and sea. Jaren squared his shoulders. We will not bow to fear or greed. Rally our scouts along the high road. No tolls demanded here. And Era, I need you to journey to the lightning spire atop the Stormhorns. Legend says its ancient fractal runes sustain the Chronicle's storm song. If they falter, the power to feed the river and protect against toxic tides may fail. Era nodded, determination gleaming in her eyes. Garrick thumped his hammer fist in agreement. Maris sheathed her dagger with a resolute smile. By midday, Stormveil buzzed with coordinated activity, engineers mapping canal lines for Greywater's commission, scouts departing eastward in Maris's wake, Garrick leading a militia to secure the northern road, and Jaren preparing supplies for Era's ascent to the Stormhorn. As he oversaw loading sledges with wind-proof tents and hearty rations, he paused at the edge of the orchard and inhaled the scent of rain-damp blossoms. Whatever new perils lay ahead, famine, piracy, traitors in the wood, the people of Stormveil would face them in unity. Jaren looked to the sky, where clouds gathered, heavy with promise. With the Chronicle's final verse yet to be tested, and his friends by his side, he felt the same spark that had carried him through mist and marsh, citadel and curse. The unwavering belief that even the fiercest storm, when weathered together, could become the breath of new life. And so as the first raindrops fell once more upon Stormvale's fields, Jaren Holt set his gaze on the Stormhorn's silver peaks, ready to climb, to fortify, and to shape the next chapter of their story in wind, water, and steel. Ira Windwick tightened her cloak against the thin mountain air, as she and a small escort led by Garrick Chisholm, and flanked by Maris's Shadowcat scouts, climbed the switchbacks of the Stormhorn. Below them, Stormvale sprawled green and gleaming, its river now a silver ribbon fed by the first rains of the season. Each breath of height brought a sharper chill and a hint of ozone, the promise of lightning and the raw power she was meant to renew. By afternoon they reached the ruins of the Lightning Spire, a monolithic tower carved with fractal runes that crackled faintly in the eddying winds. The lower stones were scorched, vines clawed through broken window. Garrick stepped aside to let Ira approach the spire's iron door, rune etched and half ajar. "After you, mage," he rumbled, hefting his hammer. Inside was darkness lit by streaks of living electricity coursing through the walls, a live, desperate energy. The spire's spiral staircase curled upward into shadow. Ira drew a deep breath and whispered the Chronicle's storm song verse, calling wind and tide to still the errant currents long enough to climb. Spiral of storm, conduit of sky, where breathe your breath, renew your cry. With each line, the crackling slowed, the staircase lights brightened and steps grew safe. Garrick and Maris flanked her as she ascended toward the spire's heart, where the final test awaited. At the summit chamber, a carved basin held a single storm shard, flickering with unstable power. The runes around it had been damaged, broken by the same hubris that had unleashed Baron Arkan's curse. Ira placed the Windsong Chronicle's storm page against the shard and began the mending ritual, tracing wind glyphs in the air, cloud runes on the basin's rim, wave patterns through her staff, and now with trembling resolve, weaving tide symbols from her very heartbeat. Lightning arced across the chamber as the shard bowed to her will, forging itself anew. A roar shook the spire, and outside a great clap of thunder rolled down the mountain, echoing through every valley and signaling that the Chronicle's storm magic was whole again. Below, Stormvale's militiamen watched the sky part into silver and gold. The river ran fuller, the orchards sighed with moisture, and the windmills turned smoother than ever. Ira descended into celebration, her task complete, but she carried a warning. Freshly charged storm magic attracts both blessing and enemies, and Jaren Holt, surveying his peaceful fields, knew more trials would come. Yet with the Chronicle's power secured and his friends by his side, Stormvale was ready to meet whatever new storm the wind might bring. The dawn of a new season found Stormvale transformed far beyond reclaimed field. Along the newly built canal that wound from the river's source to every thirsty furrow, villagers and greywater engineers worked side by side, hammering sluice gates, lining the banks with carved stone and setting windglyph wards that Ira had taught them to maintain. Garrick Tozen strode among them, offering both blunt advice and hearty laughter, his hammer fist now used to drive fence posts as often as it once laid waste to bandits. Maris of the Rift led a cohort of scouts through the bordering woodlands, ensuring no foul bandits or rogue alchemists sabotaged the waterworks. Under her watchful eye, her Shadowcat prowled like a living sentinel through the tree. At the heart of the village, a new Hall of Storms had risen, a simple but sturdy structure of oak and slate, where the Windsong Chronicle's pages were displayed in glass case alcoves. Ira presided over its opening ceremony, her robes gleaming silver in the morning sun. She spoke of balance, how wind, cloud, wave, tide and storm were not forces to be controlled, but partners to be understood. The crowd hushed as she traced runic symbols in the air, and a gentle breeze rippled through the assembled villagers, carrying the first regulated flow of canal water in a fine mist of blessing. But peace is never granted without vigilance. Only days later, as Garrick tested a newly installed floodgate, he noticed strange runes etched into the wood beneath the gray moss paint, runes of corrosion and wither. A team of masked saboteurs had struck in the dead of night, seeking to drain Stormvale's lifeblood and plunge the farms back into drought. Word reached Jaren Holt just as he returned from an audience with the Greywater envoy, Lady Celine, who had come to ratify the water treaty amidst flowers woven of barley stalks. Dropping his scroll of treaties, Jaren raced back along the canal's earthen embankments, Ira and Maris at his side, Garrick thundering behind them. They arrived to find water sluicing onto the fields in broken torrents, irrigation channels breached, drought runes glowing like embers. Maris's scouts rushed forward to corral the flooding water with hastily erected wooden barricades, while Garrick and Jaren pried open the floodgates hatch to stem the flow. As they fought the rush, Ira called upon the full might of the Chronicle's storm page, singing the final verse of the wind song as wind glyphs danced around her staff. A dome of swirling breeze rose around the gate, repelling the corrupt magic and sealing the breach. The runes flared one last time before shattering into harmless motes of mist. From the shadows of the embankment emerged a trio of cobalt-cloaked figures, disaffected survivors of Baron Arkan's old regime, now radicalized by loss to purge all magic. They summoned a hail of dagger-shaped ice shards, but Garrick met them head-on, his hammer fist smashing through their formation. Maris darted in to disarm their leader, while Jaren wove a subtle wind chant that caught their cloaks in a spiraling current and spun them safely into the waiting hands of Stormbale's militia. With the saboteurs subdued, the village's healers trained under Ira's guidance tended to frostbitten arms and bruised bodies. The canal's flow returned to its gentle rhythm, feeding every field once more. As dusk fell, Jaren stood atop the earthen wall, gazing at the lifeblood of his home coursing through channels he had fought to protect. Beside him, Ira slipped an arm through his clois. "This land, it thrives because we remember that power demands responsibility," she said soft. 3 weeks later, Stormbale held its grand festival of waters. Lantern-lit barges drifted down the canal, their cargoes of grain and orchard fruit, bound for Greywater's markets. Envoys from Duke Rowan himself arrived in a decorated barge, bearing gifts of bronze-chained aqueduct models and a promise of lifelong grain quotas at guaranteed rates. Garrick led a ceremonial hammer strike upon the inaugural sluice gate. Maris supervised the placement of a peace stone at each canal lock, and Ira guided a dozen young apprentices as they carved their first wind glyphs into the side of the Hall of Storms. At the height of the festival, after the last barrel of cider had been toasted and the final dance of the harvest reel had ended, Jaren Holt ascended a small platform beneath the canopy of illuminated apple blossoms. He carried in his hand the original deed to Stormvale, now bound in bronze and etched with every name of every villager who had helped reclaim it. His voice carried across the hushed crowd, friends, neighbors, and honored guests. "When I first stood at the edge of Stormpeak Pass, my only claim was a satchel of silverleaf spice and a desperate dream. We have weathered storms, both of wind and of the heart. We have braved betrayal, spectral vengeance, and drought itself. Yet here we stand, not as subjects, nor as a mere settlement, but as a community bound by honor, resilience, and compassion. Let this deed stand not as proof of ownership, but as a testament to what we can build together." He held the bronze-bound parchment aloft amid thunderous applause. Lanterns swayed above like constellations, and a soft breeze his old ally stirred through the orchards, carrying the scent of ripening fruit. Long into the night, stories were told of Ira's first wind glyphs, of Garrick's battle with the stone drake, of Maris's midnight raids, and of Jaren's smuggler's cunning-turned-steward's wisdom. Old Winning recited the Chronicle's unified storm song, until even the embers in the hearth seemed to hum, and children curled beneath their parents' arms, eyes wide with wonder at the tales of specters and sorceries, now laid to rest. When the last envoy departed at dawn, and the festival fireworks faded into the morning sky, Jaren found himself once more standing in the orchard's center, the Chronicle's pages safely sealed in the Hall of Storms behind him. He inhaled the crisp air, tasting both rain and renewal. In his pocket lay the Gale Heart Shard, and in his heart lay the knowledge that no matter what storms still lay ahead, Stormvale would endure. He turned to Ira, Garrick, and Maris, his steadfast companions through every trial, and offered them wry smiles. "Think we've earned a quiet life now?" he asked softly. Ira laughed, her eyes bright with mischief. "Quiet? We still have the Frostforge to visit, a Skyscribe festival to plan, and those Greywater canals to maintain. Adventure has a way of finding us." Garrick cracked his knuckles with a grin. "I like the sound of frost and sky, but first a well-earned rest, eh?" Maris's shadow cat purred against her leg. She sheathed her dagger and offered Jaren a sly bow. "Lead on, Lord of Stormvale. Wherever the next breeze carries us, we'll be ready." And as the sun climbed over the eastern ridge, Jaren Holt, once smuggler, now steward, walked through the orchard's blossoming boughs toward the sunrise. The story of Stormvale alive in every leaf, every stone, and every breath of wind that whispered, "Ever onward."